would say product, product, product. I think that sense of ownership and accountability can take you a very long way. So think of it as an operator supermarket, because I'm a strong believer that a good product sells itself. For us to be successful is to align the technical roadmap with our business objectives, because their success is our success. When then there is the dream, right? So in my opinion, that's the highest form of success. F as my KYC provider, G as my CRM, and H as my affiliate provider, right? I think I might be a little bit biased around the product and technology part.
I think that's probably the highest compliment a product can get. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Peach Marathon Podcast, the show where we meet innovators from the iGaming world and hear their stories straight from the source. John Debono, Elantil CTO and co-founder, is here with us today to share his insights. John, why don't you kick things off by sharing a few words about yourself, your company Elantil, and your product to our audience?
Hi, Maria. Thanks for inviting me. Very glad to be here. So basically at Elantil, we offer an iGaming platform that includes a player account management, a real-time data platform, a front-end product that allows you to create a casino or a sportsbook website, and a marketplace to choose the content you want to offer to your players. Basically, at Elantil, we are all about removing friction from operators and allowing them have their own identity and not have one imposed by us.
That idea of removing friction and letting operators truly own their identity is something interesting, and we'll probably come back to. But before we go deeper into Elantil, I would like to step back and talk about you, John. You've had a long journey from development to CTO. What leadership lessons took you the longest to learn, and how did the realities of iGaming shape that lesson?
I think it goes back to actually my second job, where back then we designed a platform to keep track of company assets. So this platform used to take care of geolocation information from all kinds of vehicles, such as coaches, buses, delivery trucks, taxis, and also telemetry information. We used to read fuel level, for example, from different cars, or temperatures in trucks or cold source. And basically my boss used to believe a lot in visiting our clients to get first-hand feedback from them, right? And once we went to this client, basically they had a fleet of security vans which collected cash from banks. And as soon as I step into the office, I see a lot of 55-inch monitors everywhere with our system running live on it, which they used to monitor the whereabouts of those security vans. And basically, my boss turns to me and tells me, "You see how important the system is that we're writing for this client? So imagine if one of those trucks gets held up at gunpoint, where do you think the authorities will start from to see what happened during the incident?" So something like that kind of shook me. I was traumatized around it, and basically it's very important that such systems are scalable and reliable, right? Just clever code will not cut it, right? You need a system which is much more than that.
Actually, that's such a powerful moment. I think realizing that I'd say the software that you build can have real world consequences for far beyond the codes that you wrote. And I think that thinking clearly carries into how you've built Elantil today. John, what do you think is the main differentiation that makes Elantil stand out?
Okay, so what with Elantil, we tried to build something that can be built upon. So what we intend to do with this technology is that we allow operators to have their own identity and build their own USPs on top of our technology. Whether it's their own game studio integrated right into the platform, or whether it's a customized rewarding program. With what we've built at Elantil, we try to give them the flexibility and the freedom to build on top of our technology stack.
I would say that flexibility that you mentioned actually sounds great in theory, but in practice, often it comes with challenges, especially for younger companies. For a new name on the block, what have been the biggest unexpected challenges so far, and how did you navigate them?
I think the biggest challenge that we are facing right now is scaling the company, going from a startup to an established name. We are trying to anticipate all of the complexity and the friction that may appear before it becomes an issue. The good thing about how Elantil is built, though, is that the architecture will evolve in a lot of ways to support this kind of scaling in the business. The next step, I would say, will be to have tools and automation in place so that clients can, with minimal impact, grow and be onboarded with minimal impact on our product teams. As soon as we get this step, it means that our technical and product teams have handed over all of the tools to our operational teams for the support for the business to grow.
I would say scaling is such a delicate phase, especially when reliability is non-negotiable. I want to ask you, John, as Elantil gains traction, how do you balance the speed of growth and scaling with maintaining quality, stability, reliability of your product?
What we did with Elantil is that we've started. So first of all, you need to balance by focusing on the foundations first, right? And so that innovation doesn't come at the cost of stability. For example, one of the first things that we've built in the platform was a financial subsystem that can take care of wallets. We call it the wallet system. And that is the part that should work flawlessly, as it is the part that will take care of the monetary side of the system. So as you can understand, it's quite important. Then basically what we did is we continue building layers on top of that. We call them domain gateways. So what these domain gateways do, they represent different domains in the iGaming industry, like payments, casino, sports. And these subsystems then will handle the domain knowledge. For example, in the casino world, we have the concept of a bet and a win or a loss, right? However, in sports, we have the concept of a bet and settlement, and sometimes even resettlement. So then these subsystems build on top of the wallet and take care of interchanging information between these subsystems, right? So from the casino vertical, you would say that a player has bet or a player has won, and that will translate into a monetary transaction inside our wallet system. On top of that are the outer layers of integrations, like, for example, an integration with 18Peaches, Alliat Equity, BetB Payment IQ. So these are all kind of integrations that will make use of the respective domain gateway, like payments, casino, and sports, and that makes the outer part of the system. We deliberately decide what moves fast and where we need to take our time and move more carefully. So, for example, in subsystems like wallets, it took us a couple of months of work to get that done and nail the functionality, so that outer layers like the domain gateways and then, of course, integrations nowadays take us days, not months, to develop, because the foundations underneath are very solid.
John, moving to another question. The iGaming market is increasingly competitive and saturated. So what's your strategy for client retention?
So we treat client retention very seriously, and we try to keep retention through the operational freedom I was talking about earlier, right? That we allow the operators to scale independently and give them their own freedom to build on top of what we have built as a platform. I think what we also try to achieve, even with the way we work with third-party integrations, right, and the outer parts of the system, is a faster time to market. Right? They can get to new jurisdictions, new markets, new verticals quicker as an operator. Of course, quality is one of the things that we strive to achieve, right? Basically, that the quality of the product is of a certain level that does not let down our operators. And we try to use a partnership mindset rather than try to lock them onto us, right? Because they have no other option. So we try to treat our operators as our partners, basically, because their success is our success.
Yeah, and I think that also naturally, if you want it or not, it leads to innovation. Let's agree that today's players or operators are not the same as, let's say, years before.
They're very demanding.
They're very well demanding. So with players and operators becoming more demanding, be it in game variety, regulation compliance, payment options, mobile experience, how does Elantil plan to innovate or adapt to stay ahead?
We have quite innovative aspects to the platform. And when you ask me this question, I think two things come to mind. We have a subsystem called the OMS and the marketplace. So let me start describing a little bit what we're trying to do with this OMS subsystem. OMS stands for Operations Management System, which basically think of it as an operator's mission control. It is where an operator can maintain and customize a set of operational or regulatory rules. These are applied in real time. So whenever modifications are done to these business rules, they are applied in real time. They are taken into consideration right away from the platform. So Let me give you an example. So let's say you are an operator, right? And you are owned to brands, which are two very distinct brands. One is a crypto casino, for instance, and the other one is a more traditional one, right? Using fiat currencies. So what you might do for your brands to have different identities and different flows, you might change how registration works in these two sites. Right. So, for example, for the crypto casino, a registration process would be requesting only a nickname or a handle, right, an email and the password. And for the traditional casino, you would like to start asking your users for a name, surname, address, email, and password. So the place where you go and do this customization is exactly the OMS, right? This subsystem that I'm talking about. So basically, with something simple like that, with just configuration, you can give two different identities to your brands, right? And have different flows depending on how you would like to operate your businesses. So what we've tried to do with this OMS, if you boil down the reasoning why we went down this route, is to have as much as possible an unopinionated platform. So it means that we don't take a decision on behalf of the operator of how registration should look like, right? Of how data verification is being done on their players, or when data verification kicks in, or which integrations we would want our operators to use. We leave everything in their hands. They can take charge of their business, and customize that. Registration is just one example. So, for instance, imagine data verification providers. You might want a certain data verification provider to kick in on registration for a certain market, but then another one to kick in after a profile is being updated, right? To keep your information on your system up to date and KYC compliant. For example, when wallets are created in some systems or some platforms take the decision that they create a wallet, for example, upon registration. With the OMS, you are able to create and decide when you create a wallet, right? Because for a crypto casino site, for example, hosting 22, 23, 30 cryptocurrencies might be very difficult then to introduce a currency retrospectively and give it to all your players. So in the OMS, you might want to choose an option where rather than creating a wallet upon registration, you create it on first deposit, for example, right? And you can create currencies on the fly and start supporting currencies on the fly. Or one last example is responsible gambling limits. Which ones should be offered to players? It depends on which markets you are targeting, right?
Yes.
So some markets might need or require by imposed jurisdictions certain limits, but in other markets, maybe you would like to offer certain other limits to
A
your
bit
players,
like, yeah.
So yeah, that's the OMS. The second one that comes to mind is the marketplace. So we're doing a little bit of a different thing here. So basically with this module that we've built in our platform, we give the flexibility to operators to choose their content. So think of it as an operator supermarket. So you literally go into the marketplace, choose whichever content you would like to use as an operator. For instance, A would be my payments provider, B, C, and D, my casino providers. Then I would need a sports book for my sports book vertical, F as my KYC provider, G as my CRM, and H as my affiliate provider, right? So there's a singular place where you go in, get the content, communicate and start deals and talk deals with these third-party providers, right? Once they hook you up and they set you up and they give you an integration environment on your side, there is a place where you put in the keys and the information required for that integration to work, and you're good to go. You can start using the integration right away.
Based on what you said, I believe that this level of configurability and flexibility is like, we can say that it's like your biggest privilege, one of the biggest privileges.
Yes, I think this kind of configuration allows operators then to give different flavor to different sites they have, for example, right? So eventually something that we have in our mind is that we can extend the marketplace, for example, to start not just offering content by third-party providers, but also start packaging business rules and jurisdictional rules inside it. So imagine you want to operate in Estonia, you go into the marketplace and you activate the Estonian package, for example, right? And the Estonian package would be, for instance, customize your registration because the jurisdiction needs certain fields, right, in order to register, activate a third-party provider, for example, to communicate with a self-exclusion system from a governmental entity, so it makes it a little bit easier.
Faster and not even easier. It's like it saves huge time for them. This brings me to move my next question. If you had 10 million euro budget tomorrow, would you invest primarily into product development? You're a product guy, we know. Features, game, tech, or like you would move into compliance, regulation, licensing, marketing expansion, and perhaps, or completely like you will do something new. And why?
I think I might be a little bit biased around the product and technology part, right? So I would say product, 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 and of course the tech that powers it. So I think from the sum of money, I would definitely spend 70% most probably around the product and the tech that
Mhm.
powers it, but then maybe save a little bit for the rest, right? Because of course you'll
Mhm.
compliance regulation around that product, the marketing part, and the expansion, right? In order, if it's doing well, then of course you need to grow it. Basically, the reason is that because I'm a strong believer that a good product sells itself at the end of the day, and a good product doesn't create demand; it removes all kind of resistance from people trying to use it.
John, as someone who I can say you're a vision holder of Elantil in the tech part, and as someone building a rising brand, how do you envision Elantil in few years? And uh, I know that it's very fast growing market. We cannot predict few years, but what does success look like to you?
Well, I think the logical part is that it is imperative that for us to be successful is to align the technical roadmap with our business objectives, right? So usually in our industry, new markets dictate that, new verticals dictate that, and also striving for better operator experience, right? So
Mhm.
giving our operators a better experience. So all this helps us keep in check. Well, then there is the dream, right? So the dream is something like genericization. So what is genericization? I mean, basically it's the process where a brand name becomes so popular that it turns into a common or a generic word, right, for a product type. So in my opinion, that's the highest form of success, right? When someone says, go and Google something rather than use a search engine, right? Or I Ubered, not ride sharing, or I'm using Excel rather than a spreadsheet. So imagine a Elantil, but not a gaming platform, for example, right? So that's the dream.
I agree. I think that's probably the highest compliment the product can get. But let's agree that none of that can happen without the right people and culture. And in many fast-growing companies, company culture and team buildings are often overlooked. What kind of culture are you trying to build at Elantil from day one? What warns you against the growth at all costs mentality?
I think at Elantil, our approach is to make our teams feel empowered as much as possible, right? And to show them how their output contributes towards the overall product. I think that is very important for them to understand that what they're building is meaningful, right? And it makes sense and it is appreciated even from our operators, right? From the people who are using actually the platform. I think that sense of ownership and accountability can take you a very long way. And it's key in terms of what culture you instill in a company.
Yeah, I agree. Culture really shapes the leadership. John, we are reaching to my favorite parts of this interview. You don't know who will interview next, but which question would you ask a random C-level or founder about the iGaming industry in general, or something specific related to their activities?
Well, I think I have a very straightforward and simple question that I would like to ask to any C-level right out there. It revolves around the habits, any habits or daily routines that keep you grounded as a C-level person, right? So what do you do? What are the habits? What any habits that keep you grounded, right? As a C-level, you're quite high level wise, right, in the company, and there might be some things that keep you grounded, or any daily routines that you keep. So what would those be?
I agree because I think there should be a pattern, right? That's a great question, John. This one was passed to you by our previous guest. If you could change one element in iGaming industry, regulations, commercial models, technology, player acquisition, or game mechanics, what would you change and why do you think it hasn't been changed yet?
Good question. So I'll tackle the technology part again. I might be a little bit biased, right, on this side, but okay. So imagine we lived in a world where all communication between or within an iGaming platform would be in a standard way. Take, for example, a game provider, right, that speaks to a platform. So a game provider speaks to a platform, right? They offer
Mm-hmm.
content and it is available on the platform using APIs, right, to exchange information. Now, imagine if those APIs were standard between all providers. So imagine how fast things would go, how much more content would be available on all the platforms, for example, and how little would be the barrier of entry for a new provider to be able to sit right at the table with others and give the content that they would need to give or that they wouldn't want to give to their players. So, for example, things like terminology, right? If we use a singular one, so different providers have their own terminology. For example, you would find providers that bet and win are they call them deposit and withdraw, right? And you can understand why, because they're depositing and withdrawing from a player's account at the end of the day. But imagine you would have this uniformity in terms of terminology or in terms of protocols, right? If we get a little bit more technical, some providers use JSON as a format to communicate, right, in their APIs, and some of them use XML. Or
Mm-hmm.
information passed to an integration. Sometimes when you integrate providers, for example, they pass you the transaction ID, which is represented on their side, and then you pass them back the transaction ID that you have on your side. Same things that happens with a round ID or a session ID. Also, if these terminologies and these concepts were standardized, I believe things would be able to flow faster. And not just the technical part, but what if there would be standards even around providing games lists, for example, using APIs rather than having Excel sheets, right? So casino managers usually spend a lot of time, for example, putting in new games right into their systems, and they use Excel sheets to do that. What if all the providers, for example, implemented a way that they could communicate with you a games list through an API or give you information about their games, about their available currencies, their available jurisdictions, for example, everything through an API or a health check, knowing that a provider is experiencing some form of downtime, for example, because you can hit an API and you would know that that provider right now is having some form of downtime and it's okay, as in, you can advise or put out certain games because they are experiencing some form of technical difficulties. And also maybe start using some new technological sides, right? Like new protocols, like for example, gRPC comes to mind, right? It's a technology protocol that is used between for data communication. Nowadays, there are new technologies, that we can look into and perhaps upscale or put our systems into a new level, into a new state.
Actually, it's a great way to look at some kind of long-term progress. John, before we wrap up, one final question. What's one advice you would give to every new manager, a failure to avoid or a really good habit to adopt?
I will tie it in with the empowerment thing. So I think basically what happens is that the biggest mistakes that usually new managers make is stepping in too quickly and solve the problem themselves, right? Rather than empowering their team, right? Or be supportive and allow their team to gain ownership on something in particular to be able to solve it. I would recommend that rather than doing that, instead, you would focus on empowerment and accountability. So give the people the responsibility for their own outcomes, not just tasks. When people are trusted to decide and held accountable for results, I think learning becomes safe and mistakes become progress at the end of the day.
John, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and stories from the front lines of iGaming.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
To everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good industry story or just someone who likes hearing smart people talk. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and of course, keep pitching.